Hey guys, it's Anna from Bright Lane Gardens. Tune into our video today to see how I turned an overgrown bed of oak saplings into this beautiful native flower bed. This year we finally committed to really developing the area out by our plant nursery, mostly in an effort to make it more aesthetically pleasing, but also to use as a bit of a showroom for a lot of our native plant species that we sell here at Bright Lane Gardens. This patch was originally an overgrown patch of oak saplings, with some of the saplings reaching as high as 3 feet tall, and there were probably upwards of 40 saplings in this area. If you've ever worked with oak saplings before, then you'll know that they have an extremely deep and tough root system with a taproot that can go down several feet. So it was really important that I was able to dig up every part of these roots to ensure that I don't have any oak saplings popping up in my new native plot. Once I had the entire area cleared of all the saplings, we actually went ahead and planted an apricot tree, which you could see there in the upper left-hand corner, and I raked the area free of as many roots and debris as I could to prep for my planting site. Now that our site is finally prepped, it's time to pick out our plants. I'm getting ready to head out to the nursery and select the native plants that I'm going to use in this plot behind me. This is going to end up being a partial sun, partial shade plot. As you can see, I already have a little bit of shade sneaking onto the right side of it here, and it does not have any irrigation hooked up to it. So I definitely want a couple plants that are going to be drought tolerant. We do get a fair amount of deer activity around here, so I want to select some varieties, especially for the exterior of this plot, that are somewhat deer resistant. So your bergamots, your shrubby cinquefoils, anything with a strong odor, a strong scent, or an unpleasant texture is going to make a great option for a deer resistant landscape. In general, the soil back here isn't ideal. It's really sandy, has quite a few rocks in it. I'm going to amend it with a little bit of garden soil, but I don't want to invest a lot of money into this space, so I certainly want to choose plants that are going to be able to adapt to poor soil conditions and the lack of watering, especially on the super hot summer days that we tend to get here in northern Michigan. When it comes to landscape design, it's so easy to overdo it with too many varieties. For a plot this size, I definitely want to stick to no more than 3 to 4 different varieties, and I usually want those to be within the same 2 to 3 colors, or at least range of those colors. So for example, I might want to test out some purples and yellows, but adjacent to purples and yellows would be pinks and oranges. So if a few of those sneak in, that would be okay as well. Let's pop on over to the plant nursery and see what options we have available. On one side of my landscape circle, I have my apricot tree to really add some height and anchor that far edge of the circle. On the opposite side, I did want to have a larger shrub or tree that I could use to anchor the other side. I ended up opting for a New Jersey tea shrub. This guy is going to grow to be about 3 feet tall, and he mounds up just like a hydrangea would, and the blooms actually look really similar to a white hydrangea as well. New Jersey tea is going to bloom for me starting in June and will run about through the end of August, so this is going to be a really nice midsummer bloomer for me. She can handle part sun, part shade, and does really well in drier to medium dry soils, so this is going to be a great option for my landscaping. For my smaller herbaceous flowers, I'm going to go in the order that they bloom. So my earliest bloomer is going to be my sand Coreopsis or lance leaf Coreopsis. These guys have these really pretty yellow flowers that start blooming as early as April. This is also a prolific self-seeder that's going to easily reseed and multiply in numbers over the years, so it's going to really nicely fill out that space out there. This is also going to be my longest blooming flower. The blooms will last anywhere from 2 to 4 months depending on the seasons, so this is a really fun addition to add to any landscaped area. My next bloomer is going to be my wild lupine, which of course is everyone's favorite. The wild lupine just has some incredible, really showy blooms, tall spires of blooms that start as early as May and can run all the way through the end of June. This one's going to go towards the front of my plot, so as soon as my customers start to pull into the lot, they'll be able to see that. I highly encourage you to plant wild lupine in larger clusters, so I'm going to do at least 5 to 7 of these plants, if not more. When they all bloom at once, it can really create this wow factor of a lot of blue blooms, a lot of tall spires of blue blooms all at once, and it'll definitely catch the eye of anyone passing by. Next Next on my list is purple prairie clover. Purple prairie clover is another one that does really well when planted in larger clusters. The flowers on it are really dainty. They almost remind me of a purple version of thimbleweed, but they are really fun when they're planted in clusters like that. This is going to be a June bloomer for me, and this will bloom for actually a couple months. I like the daintiness of this plant. I like the texture that the foliage brings to the plot, so this is going to add a lot of character. Purple prairie clover is also a nitrogen fixer, which means it's going to fix nitrogen down into the soil. So I want to plant this plant closer to my apricot tree so that my fruit tree can benefit from that nitrogen fixation in the soil. Sneezeweed is next, and despite its terrible name, this plant actually does not make you sneeze. It does, however, produce these beautiful coneflower-esque yellow blooms, and it's really a stunner when planted in larger clusters. Despite the small size of this plant, this is actually going to multiply rapidly, and this will take over an entire section of my plot. It does start blooming in July and will usually run all the way through until the cooler temperatures in the fall. And last but certainly not least, I have a grass to add. I almost always add a native grass to all of the plots that I do. Sometimes it's nice just to tone down the color and add something that's going to add a little bit of height or a little bit of texture. This is purple lovegrass, so it's actually going to max out around 1 foot to 1.5 foot tall. It won't add too much height for me. However, it is extremely drought tolerant, extremely deer resistant, and it blooms in this strange purple hue way starting in July. So it offers this fuzzy little cone that has a purple hue to it, and it's just a really fun addition to any native plot. This guy is a great option if you want to line the front or back of any of your plots, or if you're looking to define a certain area. A row of grasses or sedges can do a lot for that. I may or may not add a few more once I have all my plants laid out where I want them, but in order for me to visualize it, I have to put these pots where I plan to place the plants. So let's head back over to the plot and see where I'm going to put them. I went ahead and dug up the edges of this plot just so I could better define them as I'm trying to space out my plants. I also dug up any egregious weeds that were in the middle there and made sure I didn't have any tough roots that I was going to need to work through. Now that I have my area pretty much tilled, I'm going to go ahead and start laying out my plants where I think I want them to go. This is typically a rinse and repeat type of process, so I'll go ahead and fast forward this part so you don't have to watch every minute of it. I have my plants placed where I think I want them. I do need to get started on planting them relatively quickly because we have full sun today and I have a couple plugs that are exposed to roots right now, but I'm going to go ahead and do a quick walkthrough and show you where everything's at. So starting in my top left here, I have my apricot tree in the back. In front of the apricot tree, this little batch here is going to be my purple prairie clover. To the right of my purple prairie clover, I have my wild lupine. Right in the middle of my wild lupine, I actually decided to get a little crazy with it and add on 2 of my prickly pear cactuses. This is full sun drought tolerant, so this is going to be a great spot for those. In the back here, I have my sneezeweed. This is going to be a taller yellow flower that's going to do a really good job of setting a backdrop for my purple prairie clover in the front here. My wild lupine section in the middle here does cascade back and feed right into my purple lovegrass row. These are going to be planted in 2 straight rows versus clusters. I like this because this particular grass does grow in clumps, so it won't fill in between. It looks best when arranged in a linear fashion. Right in the middle there is my New Jersey tea shrub. This guy here is going to be my centerpiece of this area. This is going to grow to be about 3 feet tall and have big white blooms on it. And last but not least, in the front, I topped it off with my sand Coreopsis or landsleaf Coreopsis. This is going to be my long bloomer and also my earliest bloomer, and this will also spread via seed, so it'll fill out this area really nicely. Now that I have my plants arranged where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and get started on planting them, starting with the plugs because they do have exposed roots to the sun right now. Just a reminder, there are a handful of plants in here, definitely the sneezeweed and this purple lovegrass, that are pretty root bound. Anytime you're working with roots like this, you want to go ahead and break those up a little bit. Don't be afraid to rip those roots at the end. This just really encourages the plant to go ahead and lay out new roots, which will enable those to drive down into the soil in search of that moisture. I've officially finished my native plot. All of the plants are in the ground and exactly where I want them. I did take the time to smooth out the surface of the soil just to make sure that I don't have any unwanted low spots that would collect more water than what I want. A few tips that I like to offer anytime you're planting a plot like this. First of all, don't do it on an 80-degree day. It looks warm out today, but the peak temp was 70, and I have a week ahead of me that looks like we're going to be right in the mid-60s with a few rain showers. This is ideal planting temperature for a lot of plants like this. If you have a hot spell ahead, decide not to plant for now and wait until that hot spell is over. You'll have a much higher success rate when it comes to transplanting your plants into the ground. My second piece of advice is get up and take a step back frequently when you're planting a larger area like this. You might have noticed that I interrupted my planting process a couple times to take a step back and make sure that it was coming together in the form that I wanted it to. A lot of times when you're right up close to the plants, it's hard to tell if it's really taking the shape that you had in mind. And finally, no matter how drought tolerant a plant claims to be, it wants water when it's first transplanted. So my very next step is going to be to put the sprinkler on these guys for at least a full hour to make sure I'm completely saturating the ground so that these guys can successfully lay new roots. My next video is going to be my weed suppression for this region. Pro tip, it's not going to be weed fabric. I'll put it in a separate video and I'll link it after this one is complete, but make sure you tune in to figure out what I use on my native beds to suppress weeds from taking over my newly planted plots. We'll check back in about 4 weeks to take a look at this plot. Specifically, what I want to look for is any plants that are in bloom and any plants that are struggling and might need a little extra TLC to get established. In the meantime, don't hesitate to leave any questions for me in the comments section below. I always appreciate you spending time on our channel. It seriously helps out small businesses like ours so much. Thanks for tuning in today, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.